The Inca Empire, I think that would have gone on forever because they were really community oriented. Once the Inca took over, like no one in the Inca Empire starved. They built architecture. Everyone was safe. It was a society that could have lasted a long time.
What was the origin of the Inca Empire?
Well, it was bloody at first, like most of them are. But once they started taking over, what they did is they empire built. Everybody else had just raided their neighbors to get the resources, but everybody they raided, they turned them into the Inca Empire, and they created this incredible mita system where you took turns working. And they created the road system so they could get groups of workers back and forth. So a town of, let's say, 5,000 people, the Inca would roll up with an army of 100, 200,000 people and say, would you guys like to be part of the empire, or would you like us to escort you to the edge of the empire? And if your mayor here agrees, then he can have a house in Cusco. But then the very next month, a big work crew would show up and they'd start building agricultural terraces and storage units. And every month with the agricultural excess, they would have big parties and everybody would eat. So people lived well in the Inca Empire. It was a rough beginning, but everybody who agreed to be part of it immediately had access to a whole bunch of resources and security they never had.
So they started in South America, in Peru, in Cusco. Cusco was like the center of it.
Cusco, in their language, Quechua, it means navel or belly button. And it's up in the mountains. But there's 4 quarters. They called their empire Tiwantinsuyu, the land of 4 quarters. And the center of those 4 quarters was Cusco.
It sprung to life, in like 1200 AD, CE?
Yeah, we backwards project what it was, but it was probably mid-1200s when the first Sapa Inca, the first ruler, came in. But it was I think it's the 9th one, is Pachacute, who really started being an empire builder.
And part of that, what really defined the empire? As you said, roads. They built a massive road network.
Roads, and in the same way that the Roman strategy of building roads and infrastructure, and then every place they took over, they'd create certain key pieces of Roman architecture that kind of made that city Roman, and they'd rename it something. The Inca did the same thing. They had certain signature Inca architecture that they would build in as the administrative part. They'd send the Quipu Kumayak, the guys who would weave not the quipus, as accountants, and they would go through and say what everybody did. Okay, you're a good farmer, you're going to farm. You are a good weaver, you're going to weave. All the men here are going to take a turn at being part of the army. And they sent independent Quipu Kumayaks too. Every community had like 5 or 6 that were not allowed to work with each other, and they all had to independently send their quipus back to Cusco. And if there were accounting discrepancies, they were called to Cusco to figure out who was lying about what.
So there's like a super sophisticated record-keeping system.
Yeah, and that was the quipu. Yeah. And the Spanish recorded what they could and then burned them all.
But that's an interesting development for an empire, because that allows you to really expand and have some kind of management, some level of control.
Yeah, they couldn't. At the end, they were at least 10 million people. And there was just no way to do that without some sort of sophisticated record-keeping system.
If the Inca had to face Aztec, who wins?
Inca.
I
mean, the Aztecs were psychotic, but the Inca had just reserves for miles.
Right.
And they had that essential hearts and minds.
Right.
There was only one thing that everybody got pissed off about when they joined the Inca Empire. For some reason, everything was owned communally except the llamas. The llamas were the kings. And so that was one thing that, like, some of them would stay in town just to be work llamas, but, you don't own your llama anymore. And people are really attached to their llamas. To this day,
Yeah.
they are like family members. So it'd be like everybody walked in and said, everybody's family dog is now mine. It like really upset people on an emotional level.
Well, so llamas got domesticated at some point, probably early. I don't even know when, but early on.
It's we have rock art that progresses to make it see like a progression from people depicted hunting them to people depicted standing next to pregnant ones.
Yeah.
So it was still in that archaic period, at least, that they became friends.
Yeah, but if you roll in and you own them, that's
Yeah, that pissed everybody off. For some reason, the Inca owned everybody's llama instantly, and he would take anything he wanted. A lot of them would just get carted away that day, just sent to Cusco. They'd also take their mummies. That was a weird thing. Everybody mourns their dead, but the Inca just like ceased to accept it. They would the mummies were still there. Okay, he's dead, but look, he's still got clothes. He's at the party. Let's put a beer in front of him. Mm-hmm. They just kept people as mummies. And so the ancestral mummies of every town, part of the being absorbed into the empire was, okay, your most important mummies are now going to have their own beautiful house in Cusco. But they would physically bring those mummies to Cusco to make now Cusco the spiritual heart of their belief system.
I mean, I can see how that would piss people off, but it's also a pretty powerful way to say, like, the ancestors that you idolize, that you respect, are now in the capital.
They've been elevated. We didn't steal them. We have given them a new place of honor. And you're welcome to come visit them all the time. And they did. They have these festivals where everyone from all corners of the Inca world would come to Cusco.
And which of the civilizations mummified people? Is it
the Incas for sure mummified people, and even did some of that kind of like Egyptian-esque taking out of organs and preparing the body. They'd put like straw inside the cavity and mummify them. But the Maya didn't do it at all. The Maya, in fact, on purpose, would flood tombs with water so that the skin would float off the skeletons faster, and then they'd get back in there. It was jungly, so I think the bugs probably had part of it too. Mm-hmm. But then they would get back in there to get the bones. Mm-hmm. They'd open it back up and take the bones out and paint them with red cinnabar. The one that I was in Copan, we had evidence that they had gone in there 4 different times. And the last couple times, they only took the skull out and repainted it and then put it back in, articulated on the skeleton. But they didn't mummify. They, on purpose, would like grossly float the bodies so they could get the skin off faster and get to the bones.
But would they keep the bones?
Yeah, they'd keep the bones. And they'd pull the bones out occasionally and do rituals to them or commune with them and then put them back in.
So there's still a deep connection to the ancestors, to the physical manifestation of the ancestors then.
Yeah.
Like whether mummified or bone.
And to this day, like if you do an excavation here in the United States, Native American people don't like it. They don't like their graves, which is fine enough. I wouldn't want somebody digging up my grandma either. Mm-hmm. But the Maya, they love it.
They love it.
Every Maya person, if we find a grave, they're like, yeah, look at that. Bones. Cool. Can I touch?
Yeah. Great.
They're not spooked about it at all. They think it's exciting. I one time helped out a physical anthropologist in town in Copan to get a osteology collection together of various animals. So if we got bones from an excavation, we could see what kind of animal it was based on the collection. And this family said, well, our family dog died last year and buried him in the backyard. You go dig him up. And so we were like, okay, yeah, well, I mean, we do need a dog. We'll go dig up your dog. And they were like, but the kids really want to help you. So their kids came out. Yeah. And this was like their puppy. And it died, less than a year ago. When we got to it, one of them just like grabbed up a bone and he was like, huesicitos, like little bitty bones. Yay. Like, what a weird attitude. That's your dead dog there. But they have a different relationship with the dead.
In some sense, that's a beautiful attitude, right? I mean,
Yeah.
why pretend like we're not mortal and there's not? This is just the process of it. And it's kind of, as you say it now, it kind of would be cool.
That's what Day of the Dead is all about. And I love Day of the Dead. Halloween's this creepy thing where they're all monsters, but Day of the Dead is this beautiful time where we remember our ancestors. I convinced my kids after the movie Coco came out. Now we have an altar with all of our great grandparents on the altar, and we talk about who they were and how they lived, and we put things on the altar that mattered in their life, and we remember them on that day. And it turned something that was a weird eat too much candy and wear a monster mask thing into something beautiful where we discuss where we came from.
I have to ask about the giant stones that Inca has been able to somehow move and fit together perfectly. Do you understand? Is it understood how they were able to do that so well?
No. The moving of it, I think that we have reasonable theories. There are ways to pivot large weights. There's a great guy named Wally Wallington, a retired contractor here in the U.S., who built Stonehenge in his backyard in Minnesota single-handedly, showing how you can move big stones. So I think Wally's already figured out how to move them. It's the perfectly fit, so carefully fit together that you couldn't even put a dime in between the stones. That's the one that I think still has people baffled. The common archaeological wisdom that you'd find out of a textbook is that they just kept pecking away at it with hammerstones and setting them and resetting them until they were perfect, which has to be bullshit. That is, there is no way that they just were that meticulous. I mean, everybody's got a hammerstone. I personally think it's acids. I think they melted them together. And there are weird places when you really look at closely to these stones, which I've done a number of times. I'm going back next month to Machu Picchu and especially Cusco. I walk around in the alleys where these 500, to 1,000-year-old walls are still there. And I see things like the crystals in the andesite are almost stitched together along the seams. Like there's the andesite around it is melted and the crystals haven't. And there are other places where there are weird wipes on the wall. Like it's just melted, like somebody took a rag and wiped it while it was soft. Lots of talk about soft stones turning hard too. I haven't been able to prove it. This is one of these, end of my archaeological career chapters. I'm either going to prove myself wrong or prove it. But I think they used acids. My dad's a chemist, and he told me a long time ago that there's no naturally occurring acids. But my current theory, actually, I got the idea initially from the show Breaking Bad. I don't know if you ever saw that show. But there's a point in which they're trying to dissolve a body.
Yeah.
And they're using hydrofluoric acid, and it goes right through the ceiling. That hydrofluoric acid is so fascinating. It won't go through plastic, and you can also bring it in inert parts and then combine it. The Inca made tons of jewelry out of fluorite. Fluorite is big in the Andes, and they also mined a lot of things for gold and silver, and the byproduct of that mining is sulfuric acid. You put sulfuric acid and fluorite together, and it's hydrofluoric acid. And that will burn through andesite or anything. And if you learned how to do it, judiciously, and you didn't care whether, servants lost an arm or two, then you could actually use them to fuse these together. And I think they're fused together. I asked the city of Cusco if I could take some core samples, and they said, "Go away, gringo. Don't touch our walls." So this next time I'm going to go try to talk to the more Quechua authorities in a place called Ollantaytambo, and maybe I can convince them. But right now, they just think I'm a weird ass gringo who wants to put holes in their walls.
That's a fascinating theory. And so how could you get to the bottom of that? So getting core samples to see if there's some kind of trace.
Chemists I'm working with say that if there was hydrofluoric acid in between these, that a core sample right along a seam, they can separate out the elements in there and detect whether there was actually elements of hydrofluoric acid. I wanted to go straight to burning rocks, but they were like, no, I mean, we already know that's true. I mean, yeah, we can burn some rocks, but it would happen. That's just chemistry. We gotta prove that it would happen in the walls. So go get us samples. And that was before COVID and all sorts of, you know how it is. You probably are the same guy where you've got a 1,000 ideas, and the ones that are fruitful you run with, and the other ones you'll get back to.
That would be fascinating if true, and I hope you do show that it's true or false, either one.
I'll try to disprove it.
Disprove it, yeah. I wonder if we discount how much amazing stuff a collection of humans can do, because it just feels like if a large number of humans are just working a little bit, chipping away at stuff at scale, they can do miraculous things. So the question is, how can a large number of humans be motivated to do a thing? Because I just when we think about like Stonehenge or some very challenging architectural construction, we don't think about a large number of humans working together.
Well, that large number of humans are motivated to work together by a small number of administrators who are dynamic and convincing in some way or another.
Right.
One of my favorite quotes is, and I'm probably going to misquote it here, but I think it's Margaret Mead who said, "Never underestimate the power of small groups working together." And the truth is that those are the only people that have ever changed the world. That small, dedicated groups of people are what change the world.
Yeah.
And they inspire big groups of people to embrace their vision.
Yeah. I think we sometimes underestimate how much humans can do across time.
And we are
scale.
way less capable than we used to be. I mean, the average human had all sorts of skills that at least I personally do not. I'm wearing a shirt, but I can't make a shirt. That's for somebody else to do.